Hello everyone, welcome to this 8th lesson in which we'll start working with the mountains so we can place them in our map. We're going to create a new layer, and well, before we proceed with all these, I'm going to show you the Lazy Nezumi plugin, which we'll use to do some of the strokes. Once we've installed the plugin in our computer, what we have to do is basically open Photoshop and open, in this case, Lazy Nezumi. So when we open it, this window will pop up, which is the stroke controller window. We have a main button, which is this one here that turns the plugin on and off, so we can easily enable or disable it. If it's not enabled, our strokes are the usual we do with the program. Whereas if we activate it, we'll get a series of effects or advantages that this plugin offers. As I said, I'm not going to explain it all since it's a very extensive plugin and it would fill a whole course. But well, basically what we'll do in this course, for example, is use the option Constraint Parallel Lines, which if we activate it, we get this kind of line, which can help us a lot to draw longitudinal lines. If we press the Shift key, we can change the orientation of this stroke. For example, we can set it like this. Notice here at the top we have this little window which indicates the degrees in which we're turning. In this case, we could make the stroke this way. Okay? Besides this function, inside each option, we have more options to play around with these values. As I was saying, this plugin is very extensive, but you can check it out so you can find out what each option does, okay? We can even use other kind of brushes with different effects, and as you see, each effect is different. You see, some of them, you can use them to draw or to paint, to draw the line of a comic, to draw strokes with different effects. Okay? And others will help us draw perspectives. As I say, you can investigate, like this one is quite interesting for drawing or trace lines. But well, basically what I'm saying is that we'll use this one here, parallel lines. And well, if we use any more modes, I'll explain it to you. So basically, consider this. So back to the course, turn Lazy Nezumi on, okay? Remember this button here is for turning it on and off. And just like we said, we're going to use the parallel lines option. Here it is. With this option, what we want to do is something similar to what we do in the photo to generate longitudinal strokes like these in order to create an illustration effect. As we said, using Shift, we change the orientation of the stroke like this in order to trace these longitudinal lines, in this case horizontally. We want to do this around the contour of the continents, okay? So we're going to need a lot of patience in order to keep going, like this. We obviously can take this new layer we created and place it below the continents, like this, so we don't see the inner part. So let's patiently start doing all these. I'm going to skip it, but it has to be something like this. Once we're done, we can disable the plugin with this little button here, okay? And minimize the window. Now we're going to name this layer, and we can obviously lower or raise the opacity of this layer we created depending on what we want. So I'm going to set it to 75, and I'm going to select the mountains layer we created. I'm going to lower the opacity too, so these stains we made are not too visible, around 40. And now the next step is to create a new document. Okay, so we're going to set the resolution to 300 pixels per inch or 72. You can do this or change it anytime. I'm going to leave 300. You can set the size to the values you see on the screen. Hit OK, and well, with the format we saw before, this is where we'll create the mountains. Okay, so create a new layer, choose black color. Let's open Lazy Nezumi and we'll switch it to smoothing massive. Okay, if we don't have the plugin enabled, the stroke we make is so-so. So we enable the plugin with the option set to smoothing massive, and we can be aided much more with the stroke assistant. If we raise the amount, the assistance on the stroke is much more noticeable. Take a look. So the ideal value would be a low one, so we can do these mountain contours properly, but with certain control on our side. So just with these values on the window, we're going to start doing the contour of these mountains. Like this. Here we can take photos as a reference and focus on nature to generate these mountain peaks. Now I'm going to select a smaller brush. As you see, the layout is quite simple. It's not diffuse. And now we'll make in the central parts these kind of crests. Like this on each mountain. Alright, now let's assume the light is coming this way. So we'll have to lay some shadows on the left side, since the right side is where, due to the action of the light, we won't have any shadows. So we open Lazy Nezumi, we set a small stroke, like 4 pixels, and we're going to do these little details in the right side of the mountains. First, as you can see, very light strokes and not many of them. On the right side, we'll also do some of them, like this. This way, we'll define the valleys and protuberances of each mountain. Now we switch to Lazy Nezumi and change the option to Constraint Parallel Lines. And using this orientation, remember with the Shift key, we can change it and we can set it to 90 degrees approximately, more or less. Let's zoom in. And we're going to do some strokes on the left side of all the mountains, okay? Let's zoom in, and we're going to do as follows. We set an even smaller stroke. Let's try with 4, and let's do these lines. Doing these longitudinal lines, we're going to achieve a shadow effect. We can leave some blanks to generate more light zones. Notice that from far we'll get a very striking effect. Also, that kind of engraving or illustration effect. So let's keep on it bit by bit on all the mountains. If later we see spaces that are not blank or that we need more light, we can grab the eraser and empty those parts to generate light zones. Let's select the eraser. And for example, this zone that looks too full, we're going to empty it to generate light zones. Okay? Like this. We can rely on the selection for help. We can also use the lasso tool to select the zone and then use the eraser to erase those parts. Since we're working on a different layer, there's no problem. So we keep doing this on our mountains. Okay, let's turn off the plugin. And now we need to create a background layer to color it. So we're going to pick a color, like for example this one here, like a yellowish tone, and we're going to start filling all these with color. Okay? If we go over the edges, we can use the eraser to erase that part. Now we'll pick a darker color to darken the shadow zones. Okay, so patiently, we'll do this bit. All shadow parts are going to be darker, like this. With the eraser, we're going to keep deleting. It's also important to lock the transparent pixels so we don't go over the edge. Okay, so now we're going to do something like what we did with the continents. With the mixer brush, we can start mixing some parts so the blur is more uniform. Okay? Like this. And the bottom of the mountains will be slightly darker. So once we've done this, we can choose a lighter color to generate the light parts or wherever the sun shines. We'll work with a brush with opacity, and afterwards, using the mixer brush, we'll blur it. Now we create a new layer and turn Lazy Nezumi to paint the lighter zones. So we pick a brighter color, and using the smoothing feature of Lazy Nezumi, we keep painting all these zones. Light zones in which the sun shines directly. So we use the same smoothing we used for the mountain lines and start generating these light zones. And it's important to consider that all these mountains, and it's not mandatory that all these illustrations that we're doing throughout the course are this complex, but all these will be seen very small in the map. So it's not necessary that you do a very precise work. Okay? Then, when we place it in the map, you'll check how small it looks. So let's keep tracing these light zones. Okay, now we'll combine the shadow zone with the color zone. We'll hit Merge Layer. Why do we do this? Now we want to duplicate this layer we've created, and we'll be able to generate using the template different mountains. Lock the transparent pixels, and in this new layer, we can, for example, paint snow on the peaks. So we have two different mountains starting from the same model. And we can do this with all sorts of mountains and do all kinds of copies. Like green mountains, white mountains for completely snowed mountains, etc. Likewise, we can also create a hue saturation adjustment layer and change color saturation levels. If we hide the background, it only affects the layers below the adjustment layer. Well, you already know how this works. The adjustment layer only affects the layers below it. There are multiple options and ways of doing different mountains. We're going to uncheck this. We're going to delete what we just did. Okay? And we're going to transform this mountain in a smart object. For this, we select all the layers that comprise the work, right-click, and select Convert to Smart Object. In a few moments, I'll explain what this is for. We can now take this mountain and drag it to the other document where we had the world map. We'll leave it here, and we can now place on all the zones we set before, the highlighted zones, the mountains. This one could go over here. Remember that using Ctrl-T, we can move and rotate each element. Since this is a smart object, if we double-click it, we can enter the object again and edit it from any parameter. We can change the color. Okay, for example, like this. And all these can be done non-destructively. Now we can click here. We tell Photoshop that we want to save the changes, and automatically it will change on the document. The good part is that we can do several copies and open them and modify them as many times as we want, okay? So without any hassle, any change, it's so easy to do it. All right, now we've created a new document, like the one we had before, and we're going to start using the same parameters we saw before in Lazy Nezumi, making, with the smoothing option, these mountains. The procedure will be very similar to what we did before. First, we create the peaks, then the crests, aided by the brush and the plugin, and then we'll start drawing the shadow zones aided by the parallel lines option in Lazy Nezumi. First, we do all these little details of protuberances on the mountains, and afterwards we'll make these longitudinal lines. Remember, we have it here, parallel lines, and that using Shift we can move this line to start drawing these longitudinal lines. We will do this in all the left sides of the mountain, since that will be where the shadows are. We create a layer below the lines and start painting the base color with this color on these mountains. The process is the same we've seen before. All parts in which we go over the edge, we can use the eraser to delete all those parts. And then we can lock the transparent pixels and begin painting the lights and shadows. Once we have this, remember we can select the elements, convert them to a smart object, and save this file with a new name in order to have more mountain variety in our map. Okay? What we'll do next will be other kind of mountains in which the procedure is the usual, only the shape is different. In this matter, notice that the mountain peaks I'll create next are one on top of the other. This will make it easier for us to make these mountains in a more vertical format. First the peaks, and then the top parts with a slightly thinner stroke, like this. Then we'll make the small details of the mountains, those protuberances, and the next step will be to place the light spots. For that, we can use Lazy Nezumi with the parallel line stroke. So, patiently, like before, we keep doing them, and then using the eraser, we can start to erase some parts to generate empty zones or light zones. Let's lay a color, darken the parts in which the shadow would be present, and place highlights in the zones in which the sun would shine. In this case, the right side. Okay, so with all these changes and mountains we made, we have enough variety to place these mountains in a map. Some of them snowed over, some other with vegetation, etc. This will be the step we'll make next. So let's see this snowed mountain we generated. We'll place it in the north side in the snow zone. Okay? Here. This mountain is snowed, so in this climate we said here would be ideal. We're going to keep placing the different mountains, and we can also duplicate them and place them behind each other and generate mountain ranges, like in this example. And we're going to set the mountains throughout the map. We can use the mountains to cover these river courses with it, and this is at your own discretion. Patiently, you keep placing them, and since obviously your map will be different, you decide where you place them. When we have everything ready, create a new group, and this group will be the mountains group. We select all the mountains we made and place them inside. This way we'll start organizing all the elements, alright? Okay, we left this one outside, so let's put it in here. It's important that all the elements we make, both trees and mountains, everything goes into its corresponding group, so we have everything grouped. And that's pretty much it. Let's save the file with the name of the map, So we have a copy. And continue in the next lesson where we'll see the forests and the trees we can generate in this map. Okay, so we'll leave it here and I'll see you in a bit.